All right. So it's 1:05, and due to some technical difficulties, we waited a few extra minutes to get started, but I just want to welcome everyone to today's webinar. It is MSPs, Stop Being 24/7 and More 007, How to Effectively Assess Urgent, Emergent, and Important Issues. Thank you for joining us. I am Lisa Allen, President of the Michigan Association of Medical Staff Services, and I will be the moderator for today's program. Today's webinar is being sponsored by the Michigan Association of Medical Staff Services and is hosted by the Hardenbergh Group. Before we begin today's program, I'd like to share a few housekeeping details. All attendees' microphones have been muted for this presentation. To ask the presenter a question, click on the Q&A icon located on the navigation bar at the bottom of your screen and type in your question. You'll also see a chat icon, which can be used to submit comments during the presentation. As time permits, at the end of the program, I will read the submitted questions and ask our presenter to respond. Your NAMS approved CE certificate will be emailed to you within 48 hours directly from Hardenbergh in your thank you for attending follow-up email. Also included in that email will be the slide from today's presentation and a link to take the short survey. We hope you take a few minutes to share your feedback. It is now my pleasure to introduce today's presenter, Maggie Palmer. Maggie is the Vice President of Medical Professional Services and Regulatory Affairs at Parkland Health in Dallas, Texas. She has over 25 years of experience in medical staff professional services and numerous other administrative areas of healthcare. She currently serves as the president-elect for the Texas Society of Medical Service Specialists and has contributed on the HC Pro advisory panel for the Credentialing Resource Center and medical staff briefings, and has written numerous publications. Maggie has a master's degree in healthcare administration from Central Michigan University, go Chips, and is NAMS dual certified. Now I would like to turn it over to Maggie.
Thank you so much. I'm going to pull up my slides here. Okay, and here we go. Well, thank you so much for that introduction, Lisa. I greatly appreciated it. So really, I just want to start this off with thank you for attending today, and also thank you for everybody sharing those comments. It really touches my heart when I see that friends, old, new, and places I'd like to go and places I've been from. So we'll get this started. Today, we're going to talk about some of the learning objectives that we have in regards to this. And first, the learning objectives would be to define urgent, emergent, and important, because as we know, everybody thinks everything's urgent. We call it the UWE request. We kind of make fun of that word, UWE, because it's the acronym, but also it's just gross. So we decided to use UWE instead of gross. And discuss how to prioritize those to avoid imminent danger to the health of any individual. And we'll talk a little bit about that and some things that may surprise some folks. Then we're going to identify how to use an SBAR grid. And some of you may be familiar with this, but I also presented an actual example of that we went through for those of you that may not be familiar or haven't done them in a while, what an SBAR may contain or look like. And it can be used once UWE is defined to provide essential, concise information, not only for my team, but also leadership in case they do ask. And then we're going to outline the steps, how to report the requests, issues, and challenges to leadership. Because as you know, I did a board report maybe about a month or two ago, and my first slide was bonbons. And I said, no, we don't sit around and eat bonbons all day. And then I went into what we did do, and they really appreciated kind of that breakdown for us. So, you know, we'll talk about that as well. So I always have to laugh at this. Why is Monday so far from Friday and Friday so near to Monday? And when you think about it, it seems that everything seems to happen around 4:30 on Friday. You start to get the requests and the calls for temporary privileges, badging access. Oh, can we do a modification of privileges? I need a change in this policy. Why they wait till 4:30 is always kind of a mystery, but we're going to hopefully tackle that a little bit today. And this is generally the process. We're watching the clock. It's 4 o'clock. We know it's coming. The phone rings, and what do? Oh, we can't avoid it because we can't. We're just MSPs, and it's very hard for us to walk away from being able to help anybody that may need it. So a couple things that we'll go over. What are challenging scenarios? Some of them may be some things like temporary privileges, and I have just a recent story about that. Modification of privileges, also a recent story about that. So I'm not sitting here not experiencing any of these things that go on. Access issues such as badging or EMR access or other access issues within your organization, and then suspensions. And we know that suspensions can range quite a bit on what we're going to be suspending for. So we have some challenges and scenarios. What do we do all day? What outsiders really don't understand about a department? Yes, let me think. I think it was June 3rd, we got a request to add something to one of our PA, delineation of privileges. We are currently revising all of our delineation of privileges, but they said, can you just put this on there, take it to electronic vote? So, because MEC is this Thursday, and then of course board, and we absolutely said no. There are things that we need to understand. And they were like, well, it's just adding one thing. And then I said, we are currently revising 158 delineation of privileges, combining them down to hopefully 70. We have requests, we have priorities, things like that. And so we actually pushed back this week on doing that, and they're going to have to wait till July. But what was interesting is that these PAs are going to be assisting in surgery, surgical oncology, things like removing Mediports and items like that. And I said, well, they don't qualify right now for that. So why don't we implement TIPS, which is our training in progress? And the training in progress allows them, when we document it, it has to be approved, what sequence of training that they'll do. And they cannot touch actually a patient until they are privileged for that. But they can start things like observation. So we are working because they're already on staff. So there are things that we do offer out to those. So moving on to that, meeting management, agendas, minutes, invites, room, food, coordination, follow-up, reporting. They think they show up for that hour, and that's all it takes for us to prepare. So, we built out a timeline for our leadership of those committees to understand it's generally about 6 to 8 hours that are encompassed in one meeting. We do 80 meetings a year. So we started to attach numbers and timelines to these things. The chiefs or the chairs love that information, docs like facts. And what they did is now they're able to speak to other people saying, I can't believe they can't get this to a meeting. And our committee chairs back us up, and they say, this is why. Governance, bylaws, rules, regs, policies. We're, of course, as we all are, sometimes feeling a major overhaul needed in our bylaws or policies when we have to implement something and they don't quite match what our process is. There's a lot of work in that. We can't just put in what we want. Legal needs to look at it, needs to go through a lot of committee review. So that's another thing that a lot of people don't see or feel, because how often do people really look at bylaws besides us? Implementation of new credentialing software programs. We're constantly upgrading the software that we do have as we progress, and I'll talk about how we progress and utilize UI for that. Backlogs of initial applicants. Boy, all those residents graduating, they want them all to start July 1st. I'd love to run an activity report July 2nd, see who really started July 1st, but that's next year's little project for me. Or reapplicants for credentials and privileges. We try to space ours out right now according to their birth month, because otherwise we had a very high bolus of reappointments every July. It just incrementally grew June and July because we appointed so many from completing programs, we're tied to an academic facility, and that number just grew exponentially. So we had to change that process, and that came out of our UI discussion. Merger and acquisition of other healthcare facilities resulting in increase of credentialing and privileging requests. I'm blessed that we don't have that, but we do open new clinics. And so we have to make sure all those practitioners then are aligned with any new clinics. Also too, what else? We have medical leave or absence or any leave of absence. And generally it's after the fact, they've already gone, we've discovered something, and now we have to race to try to clean that up and make sure they're not going through reappointment during that leave. So many things that people don't think about outside our office. We're currently going through that revision of that policy because our physicians didn't actually want a policy. And I said, there has to be a policy. I want the practitioners to know the impact of them not requesting leave of absence. And it was very interesting that the first impact we had after that meeting where they didn't want it, it was actually our chair of our bylaws committee. So that kind of rang a little bell for that person. Increased volume of locum tenens or employed physicians requesting credentials and privileging. Luckily, we appoint everybody to staff, so we do zero, and that's it, zero temporary privileges. I know, lucky, right? And I'll talk about a case that we currently had that I had to push back. Short-term coverage of staffing and gaps, permanent employees. A lot of times they say, hey, we're having problems, you know, we need temporary privilege or somebody because of a particular service need. And this is what I used on the last one. Well, you have 65 pediatric anesthesiologists. We don't have a pediatric unit. We do have a NICU, and that's why we need them. But I don't see a particular staffing issue based upon not being able to schedule very well. Sometimes I have to be a little crabby for them to get the message across. Assistance required transition to a paperless environment. That takes time, and that takes my team away from doing things. So people have to realize that we're operations and things are constantly changing. Of course, the ever-loving social events, Doctor's Day, which I love, don't get that wrong, but general staff meetings, celebrations, that takes a lot of time away from the core of our work. So I have to make sure that either I partner with other departments, which I have with nursing on Doctor's Day, and that was a fabulous partnership. But they have to know we do this. And then rosters, mailings, notices. We handle over 24,000 individual notices annually. So that's a lot of notices and paperwork and documents flying around. So urgent, emergent, important, the UI. A lot of times, this is what I actually feel like. I've gotten to the good point where I'm actually putting these sticky notes on my screen so I see them every day and they don't get piled up on my desk. But to be honest, you know, sticky notes, sometimes I don't look at them. So you have to be very careful of that. But at looking at this is what we sometimes feel like at the end of a day. Like Monday, I felt like I'd already worked a week, and not in hours, but in volume of things that I had to attend to. So the stress meter goes up. I try to remain really calm and cool on the exterior, but I know I have to answer to my leadership. And I know I have to answer, more importantly, to my team, because anything I decide flows to them, the people actually doing the work. So we're going to go through what UI means, some of the criteria that we use to determine what we're looking at. So for example, if we're going to categorize something as urgent, we have to address it in 1 to 5 days, working days. So you'll see on the UI, it's 1 to 7, because we do have some salary folks that prefer to have kind of flexible hours. So we try to work with that. But the important part is, can we address it and solve it within those 7 days? If we can, it's not urgent for us, and it has to be reality for the person requesting it. Impacts regulatory or compliance and or law, or impeding operations and support services ability to perform duties. Those are my team. So impeding operations, I have an operations team and a support services team. I also have a tech team and peer review, but any one of those, if they're impacted, then we need to respond immediately, such as, you know, if our credentialing software goes down or our peer review software goes down. Emergent, address within 6 to 30 days, but resolution may take 8 to 90 days. No immediate jeopardy, but the impact may be the same criteria as above, but reality really dictates the timeline reasonableness, and it's really important to communicate that to all parties. Important. Is this nice to have or need to have? Is it improving an existing process? We try to address and prioritize within 30 days. And while they're in the important box, we call that our greenhouse. And our greenhouse, it's not a parking lot. Our greenhouse is because we've planted the seed, we're going to make it grow. It might grow a little bit small because it's in the greenhouse, but it's important that we don't let that die. In a parking lot, you know, battery can go dead in a car. So what we do is we try to put that mindset in. Then we also have what's called the sparkly unicorn. I used to work at a technology company that was in the medical staff credentialing line of business. And whenever I walked in with ideas, this is what we need as MSPs, I was known as a sparkly unicorn. So we do have a sparkly unicorn, adding the wow factor to what we currently do, optimizing resources. Those are very important, those are the dreams. And everybody can put something in that sparkly unicorn dream. And then we use this acronym a lot, MVP, which is minimal viable product, which means what can we launch, even if it's an urgent or emergent or any of the categories, that gets us moving, but with intention to improve incrementally. So the example I always use is Microsoft Excel. If back when they first pushed it out, Microsoft in the package in the late 80s, if they would have pushed out the product they have now, to all the bells and whistles and everything that they had in there, I bet they wouldn't have got the users they needed because it would have been too complicated. They did the MVP, minimal viable product. What will get people interested and at least satisfied now? And then they start to ask for improvement. So now the Excel of today is nowhere like the Excel of the past. There's so much more you can use it as a tool versus a spreadsheet. So things that generally will fall under these urgent is time frame of those 1 to 5 business days, or suspension or access. Emergent time frame 6 to 30 days. Yes, gasp, temporary privileges. Since we don't do temporary privileges, I know a lot of organizations do. So that's why it's important to be on this slide and part of this presentation for everybody to understand that what temporary privileges may mean to you and why we don't have to jump to urgent. And also modification of privileges. So we'll go over that as well, and I have examples. And then important, of course, the 30+ time frame. So what we do and how we manage this is that my team we meet all the leaders. So the leaders include, of course, the formal leaders that we have. I have a director and 3 managers over different areas. And then what we have is senior coordinators. They also attend. And then we rotate through my entire team that at least 1 or 2 people from each of my 4 areas or teams attends one of these UIs so they can get an idea of what projects we have, why we make the decisions we do. Better off, the last time we had people that were invited that said, I have an idea, and that was music to my ears. So we incorporated that into the appropriate idea, which would have been important. So we didn't forget that. And afterwards, those folks that were just invited for that one were so appreciative that they understood the decision-making process and how things flowed in our department. So what we do during this UI is we document the projects. We assess the risk of not doing the project as an urgent or emergent. We prioritize within each one of those categories. We set expectations not only for the folks that are going to have the ownership of that, but we communicate back to any outside party that may have requested this project. And then we review monthly by medical staff, professional service and regulatory affairs, long name, the leadership team. So we come back once a month for 3 hours. I know, 3 hours, but it's amazing how fast that 3 hours goes and what we're able to accomplish in that process. And I still always ask the team that's attending, do you find this useful? And I hear yes every single time. So one of the tools that we do use is called an SBAR. And this is really prevalent in nursing to do root cause analysis or what happened. And so an SBAR is actually going through what the situation was that caused this discussion or request for a project. What the background is, how did we get here? assessment. Okay, we've looked at what the situation in the background is. What do we assess that where we're at based upon those two reviews? And then we make a recommendation. There'll always be others, there'll always be considerations, because nothing flows as perfectly as you want it to. But what is important, excuse me, is to document. Because what happens is some of these SBARs may go into the greenhouse. And we want to make sure that we've documented why, and we have a folder in SharePoint that we put all of these in one, each respective level that they're at. One thing that we also do, this is my old office, which I'll click to this picture, but this is before we started inviting all staff in various times to the meeting, is my office was just right of this slide. And I would take all of these, we did Ames grids too, all of the projects that we had, look at them, they're all the way down this hallway, and we outlined everything, we dated it when it was complete. And what touched my heart and made me happy is when I saw my frontline team stopping and reading them and then coming in and asking questions. So it was so worth that time to put it out there. The best day is when our CMO and our CEO, COO and CEO came through our old office to evaluate the space, and they stopped and read each one of these, and we're so excited about it, complimented us. And I said, make sure you compliment the team as you go to their offices, because really they're doing the work. I'm just the face of it. So we make sure that we communicate all of this. So let's talk a little bit about urgent. So urgent would be suspensions, likely to fall in the urgent category. And the reason why is that it could, of course, as we know, avoid imminent danger to the health of any individual. That's in our bylaws. It's an immediate suspension. So for that way, it's an urgent almost, and we don't document every one of these on what I'll show you is our slides. We don't document those. We just know they're urgent. So those have to be done. Those are documented through the software and all the information that we gather during that time. It could be administrative, such as non-renew of license or DEA, insurance, or the board. And we gave them notice on this date, you will be administratively suspended. So we have to go through and do that. It's important to have that process, because then you don't think about it, but it is still urgent. Have a sense of urgency. Now, this isn't the why, but I find in my career, what we do is so difficult. There's so many details, is sometimes it's very painful. And we could have a tendency to, I don't want to say ignore it, but not give it the attention it needs right away, or have that sense of urgency to categorize it as urgent. So we need to follow that sense of urgency. Of course, we always say that follow your bylaws, contact your leadership, contact your corporate counsel if it's urgent, depending, of course, if it's a suspension, we always do that. And then utilize a checklist and timeline. That may seem very rudimentary, but as I've traveled in different organizations and even my own, we're lacking in these things because we don't take the time to stop to create or update. And that's part of what we bring back through UI as well. In the important stage is looking at, is this form still applicable? Is this checklist still applicable? So it's important to take the time to put these things in place, and don't put it upon yourself, but I know there are some single folks in the medical staff office that they have that responsibility to do it all themselves. So hopefully you'll be able to gather how you can control some of this urgent. And then, so the access issues on urgent could be loss of EMR, badging, other access issues. Now, what used to happen to me for these three issues is I would get a call from the ED at 2 o'clock in the morning because the practitioner has now come in for his scheduled time, and him or her, and can't access the EMR for whatever reason. Their badge didn't work. So I was getting calls at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning pretty consistently when I started. And so I said, this can't happen anymore. I'm not a morning person to start with. Generally, that would be my nighttime. But I wanted to make sure that we got this under control. So we did a project for this, and able to mitigate these. I haven't, knock on wood, I have a glass desk, but let's use that, that I was able to mitigate this, and I do not receive these calls. I have not received these calls since end of 2019. Scenario, know your downstream systems and workflows. So if you are getting some things with technology, EMR, or even policy related to occupational health, make sure you know who those contacts are and you have them available no matter if you're at home or at work, because generally you'll get these urgent calls after hours. Audit your data and processes frequently. So we discovered that there was a data transfer issue, and we backed up the dates that we did these updates, and that solved a lot of the problem. Also a phone tree for key fixers. When I first got there and I got the 2 a.m. call and I was new, I was like, I have no idea who to contact to get the access returned. So it took me 7 hours to get that access returned, and I didn't want to do that again to the practitioner. Of course, that could impact patient care. They actually sent him back home. So I felt really responsible for that. Communicate to the medical staff. Remember that one practitioner was the issue, but then you got to think, oh, there's always more than one, and I want to catch them all now. So it's important to be able to communicate to the medical staff. If you are experiencing any instances in access, please contact, and we gave them that information. And we would send that out as a memo to the entire medical staff. If they didn't have issues, they just didn't review that. Communication when resolved with an apology for the inconvenience, it goes a long, long way, even to the entire medical staff. So I did do a personal, I had a practitioner that this happened to. I called him personally and apologized for it. He was thankful for the work that we did to reestablish it. And then we sent out a memo closing the loop on the first one saying, you know, we apologize if there's any inconvenience, if you continue to experience. It's important to communicate that. Work with IT and other vendors to mitigate repeat occurrences. It's not enough to think, oh, I'll just back up a date. You have to think what the downflow is. Can your software manage that? Is it going to open the gates to your access appropriately? And then track these occurrences, because it could point out something else that is causing the issue. We may have fixed it today for the next 30 days or even the next year, but then all of a sudden we see things starting to pop back up. We pull that S-bar, we look at it, and then we re-review and we say, XYZ changed their process on their end. We weren't alerted, so then we work together as collaboratively to make that fix. Urgent, SPAR, initial applicant onboarding. So what was happening? We never do our work fast enough, right? So due to ongoing complaints of the delays in application processing, I could go on and on, that it'd be nice if they sent it back in the 10 days we ask and not the 6 weeks. But the chief medical officer is requesting us to expedite credentialing approval via subcommittee of the board of managers, so delegating, to speed up the time it takes to get the applicant to patient care. So as we know, the Joint Commission, if you're Joint Commission accredited, allows that subcommittee to do that. But one thing I did, I stopped instead of saying, oh, Joint Commission allows it, is we did an SBAR on this. And first of all, this was the situation. Then when we went into the background, yes, Joint Commission says that, but CMS does not recognize that. The entire board has to have that approval, not the subcommittee to board, even if you send it to the big board to ratify. And that is solid by a case in the state of Texas. So the state of Texas actually says, nope, we don't recognize it either for certain hospitals. We're a county hospital. Now, private hospitals, you know, may have something different because they're not getting the taxpayer monies on that. But I was surprised and I learned something new. But the other thing is this also squashed temporary privileges. So no temporary privileges and no expediting files to a subcommittee. That was a benefit of doing that SBAR. So here's an example that we walk through. It's condensed because I wanted to get it all in one slide. And we went through what the situation was, what the background is, what our turnaround time is. And turnaround time was high at that time because that's why they were asking. So we had to go back and we had to look through all things. So what was the recommendation? Reset the benchmark for the MSPs. Due to volume request, I was able to add additional FTEs. So all of this can be a benefit. Credentialing calculator, so you'll see that later. We do a newsletter. We synchronize strategic dates and provide data stats on no volume because we're trying, as my boss calls it, cull the herd. We're almost a 900 bed facility, and we have 3,100 practitioners, about 2,000 too many. So I'm working on that. Other were the things: Texas law does not permit state-funded hospital to expedite approvals. In consideration, this is not temporary privileges. Applicants held to their timelines, and we may have to reprioritize applicants. So that also came out of that. We would have anesthesia sent, or radiology is the best one. So radiology would send 10 new applications at one time, and they would all want them at the same date. And can we expedite? Can we do this? And I was like, well, no, at first glance, you have 2 that need a waiver. You have another one that hasn't practiced in 2 years. So please reprioritize your applications or who you really want to start, and it's going to darken our door on that day. So they really do that for us now. Not all the time, and sometimes we send them a reminder, but it's really been a solid benefit. So let's talk about Emergent. Yes, temporary privileges. You know, it's important for patient care, treatment, and service need, or when the applicant of new privileges with a complete application raises no concerns. We don't allow that because we don't do temporary privileges. We still have the reference in our bylaws, and we still have a policy because it could come up, especially in the important patient care, treatment, and service need. And what we've done in our policy is define what that is, because service need does not mean poor scheduling. It has to mean that there's not another practitioner available in your organization with the same privileges. So just on Friday about 3:30, so they're trying to improve their time, I received a call that we had a pregnant mom at 29 weeks coming in to have a procedure, done a transfusion, and the person that normally does that is on vacation. Okay, and we've called all around and nobody can do it, except for somebody not on the medical staff. Can we get temporary privileges? My first thought, of course, always goes to that patient, especially that mom. And so I said, let me see what I can do. First thing I have to do is reach out to my CMO, and my president of medical staff gave him the situation. I said, well, I want to kind of let you know there's 22 other practitioners that hold that privilege, and one of them happens to be the person that requested the temporary privileges. So within about 15 minutes, my CMO came back and said, no need for temporary or privileges. So I was like, good, 5 o'clock, clocked out. But that's what I did. You have to think about resources to save your own bacon, because, you know, to get somebody and get all this paperwork and get this done because they wanted the transfusion to happen the next day. We all know that story. The patient needed it. So it would have been very difficult, not impossible, because MSPs are miracle workers, to do. But what I did is I took what I knew I needed to state, saying, well, this does not qualify for an immediate patient care need or service need, because we do have other practitioners on staff active that are privileged with that. Squashed it. So it's very important to know those things, who you have on staff and how you can push back a little bit on temporary privileges. Sharing tools, education, communicating, and policies can help tremendously as well. So what we did is we looked at the temporary privileges. We're revising this. I'm still revising it today. Again, because there are some changes. But what was really good about this is it gave a lot of thought to our medical staff about temporary privileges, how we can best manage it for them if they project out far enough, or know who really their medical staff comprises. So we help them with that. And they're very appreciative that they don't like it. But they're very appreciative that we are still responsive and we are still providing a solution for them. So I want to talk a little bit how we get through some of these items. So we have what's called the credentialing calculator. And this credentialing calculator we designed because we wanted to not lower, but actually align the expectations of outside departments, our HR department, our service departments, of what it means to request an application and what it takes to get an application through our office and then onto approvals before they can start. We are getting start dates within 30 days. or they would go out 60 days, but they would do the start date before the board or whatever the case may be. And we were always a bad guy. So I had to stop that. My team works too hard for that. So what we did is we developed this tool, and I believe it's going to be included with your deck. And what we did is we defined all and helpful information that is needed for us to be able to process an application. There's various tabs. We do have an onboarding list that we share with them, because they'll send us an application, it's missing items, and they say, well, we sent it to you on this date, and we're like, you're missing all these items. So we do communicate that to protect ourselves, because we want to get this done. So if you look at that, we provide all this information, what it means, because we provide a tool that looks like this. And it's very simple. It's in a spreadsheet. And the spreadsheet, this is kind of the high level view of it. In your spreadsheet, you'll see a breakdown of all the steps. But on here, we say that we need you to request this application by this date. We have all kinds of steps that go on between, but we need it received back by this date in order for it to get approved by this date. You know, we don't put in MAC and credentials and all the other stuff, you know, that's in the detail part, but this one is, you please request it by this. Please make sure the application gets back to us complete by this date, and then we can make your start date. Mostly it's based upon new employee orientation, which they hold every 2 weeks. Lately it's been every week because of all the hires we've had to do, especially in nursing. So we've published this every single year since 2018. And it really got people aligned with what the expectation was. Now, when we do this, or you do this, make sure that you're making these dates and communicate ahead of time when you can't. We had a problem where we were trying to, if you look in the second box to the right, that's actually July month that we're working through. This is the detailed part. And working days to process prior to file completion deadline is 46. And what we mean by file completion deadline is that it goes through audit and is at least through the chief and approved to go to credentials committee. So that's kind of the detailed portion of it. Our team has a similar calendar, but it's very long because we have different things when it needs to go to audit, yada, 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 that we don't need to share with everybody outside our department. This has been a miracle worker for folks. They actually refer to it now outside of our department. So, I hope you find use out of it as well. Of course, you'll plug in your own dates on whatever your meetings are for that if you'd like to use that. So Emergent, important. Modification of privileges, which one is it? Because is it something that we're going to do in the future, or is it something they need to do now? Is it on the delineation of privileges? So that would be Emergent to get them to the next committee review. But it could be important if they're adding new privileges or procedures to the application. So it also depends too if the modification press could be requested or be paired with the request for temporary privileges or for a new applicant or credential medical staff. Of course, we don't currently do that, but yeah, you could. If your bylaws allow it. So you want to make sure that you have that and you have a policy that speaks to that. Processing time may be shorted as less is needed, as we all know. We know what the minimums are for these, and you just follow what your bylaws are and what's required by your accrediting body, and you can be done. You can manage that very well, but you need to communicate all the things up front of what it means for temporary privileges to your team. All right, emergent, urgent, important. So these are examples, and these are just high-level, messy examples, but these are actually the slides that we do with the team that we meet once a month. So as you see here, what we do is we go through operations. Operations brings these requirements for new requirements and big updates, and we have to have this solved within 7 days. And I know it seems odd. It seems like, wow, the training is going to take longer. Well, the solve is starting the training and make sure that it's consistent. And on urgent, I tell my team, if you come to me with any more than 2 or 3 items, it's either going to get sent to emergent or it's going to get sent to important, because we can't manage 5 or 6 important things in a week, we have other work that we have to do. So at this meeting, we discuss where we can move anything that we feel can't be solved in this timeline. So here's support services. Support services is my governance team. Those are the medical staff coordinators that do meetings, minutes, bylaws, all of our governance documents, maintenance of delineation of privilege forms, things like that. So as you see, there's 2 items here. We just revamped our FPP and OPPE process. So it was important on this urgent that we reported out how that was going and any issues. Here is that right here, the report cards were not sent yet. So that needed to be done within 7 days. And we talked about other things. Hey, we need a different mailbox. It's going to a general mailbox. Let's start to, fine tune so we don't miss these FPPEs and OPPE questions or inquiries that come through or documents that come through. Tech team, same thing. You guys can read all these slides, you'll get the deck, but it'll kind of give you an idea or flavor of what we considered urgent in some of these aspects. And then for emergent for operations, address, not solve, address within 7 days. And the resolution might be 30 to 90. So they may have already addressed it prior to the meeting, but it's important that we track this through completion. Same with support services for address within 7 days. And then the yellow highlight sometimes, moonlighters might have been in a discussion, but the yellow highlight is kind of where we landed. So that's important too. And then it'll be updated on the next month's. Emergent for the tech team. Everybody's got something a little bit different, but what's also great about this is the tech team, eyes are open what operations is doing. Eyes are open support services. All of them interact. So they'll say, tech team will go, now we know why we get so many requests for this particular thing. Let's put it as a project. Or support services would say to operations, let me help you with what we call special considerations and documentation, because they had the experience for that. So there's a lot of interaction of that. And then important are things that too, we can move up or down. Maybe it's a little bug in our ear we heard from somewhere else. So what we do is we try to put that on the important, and we may have to go back and realign those. So the tech team, you can look at all of this, track leadership and MD staff is in red. You'd think we'd have it, right? So, but it's important. Right now, it's not meeting the criteria of the other 2, but it's important to have. So rose-colored glasses, that's me in the sparkly unicorn. So I always present these things, and I know folks are going, I'm the only person in the office. I'm, overwhelmed. I'm already working these hours. But things that we can do to help mitigate that, because we still get calls, even if we put these UEs into place. But before saying no, consider the options. You want to be the solver in these equations, because then they respect maybe what the solution is and offered that doesn't meet what they required, but it's a good solution. So what I do, and this is for my temporary privileges when I get requested, and this is how we squash them, or how we realign requests for new applicants, is run a roster of current medical staff to assess the need and offer to the requester. I send it to them, and I know they're probably like, dang it. But the fact is, it's a good eye opener for them. And I send the volume attached to those practitioners. And some of them have 0 volume and no call. Why are they here? So I'm planting other seeds in their important greenhouse. Run a roster of new applications already in process. There may need a specialty just waiting for committee review. So a lot of times we really have to keep on top of what is going on. If they ask for temporary privileges, to say, hey, you have an applicant that's going this month. Can you wait till this day? And they'll be like, yes, because once they drop that application request on us, they just wait for it to get approved, or they nag along the way. And if we do this and run the roster and say, hey, you have these other ones, and sometimes they'll pull the other one and say, can you put this one in front? If you give me enough time, we can certainly consider that. Communicate temporary privileges policy. We do that annually. And the reason why we do it is because we want to make sure that they're going to ask, and we put a solutions page on there if they're having any challenges. in getting staff on, not because of our process, but because of certain needs. And then stand by your policy and seek your support from leadership. My CMO immediately said, this is not going to occur. I'll go back to you in a minute. And he did. So have food for the thought for the day and have your documents ready. Remember and do a little bit of research. In my research, one temporary file displaces 3 other applicants. Make sure they know that. So say, what other 3 do you want me not to process? And they're like, you can't process them at the same time. Say, not if I'm doing temporary privileges, because I got to get it done in a day. That's my whole 8 hours. Ask department to prioritize based on current staff and displacing other applicants, and send them a credentialing calculator. Even though you've sent it once, we send it many times throughout the year. So I want to talk a little bit about important. Important could be things like this. The CERT grid that we need. What are tools that we can use or resources? So we went down this list and thought, you know what, for important, we need to put these things in place, because when we had somebody from the frontline team sat and said, it's really hard to follow all the specialties and all the requirements they need for certifications. So we developed a matrix tool. From the top, here's your ATLS, here's your specialty. Oh, the 2 meet required. So they were very thankful for that, and it was an easy fix. So what you want to do is go through things that constantly come up and are more of a kind of a drag, put them in your important, and think about resources or tools you want to develop so they don't come up anymore. And a couple of things that we've implemented because of issues of not having disclosure of all hospitals that somebody may have worked at is we do the MPDB query, self-query. And also too, for our new residents and also people that maybe have completed their programs in the last 2 years, we require the program director evaluations. They all give them to residents upon exit. So when the resident says, I never got one, ACGME requires it. Sparkly unicorn, as we get towards the close, it could be of many things. And this is what I'm always pretty keyed on, is vendor software being a little bit more intelligent. I love all the things it does now, but I would love that they have it so to prevent an applicant from requesting privileges they're not eligible to perform. And how they do that, they have to fill out the application first, and there's certain things, programmed, attached, or downstream to the DOP that blacks it out, that they can't even ask for that privilege because they don't qualify. But remember, they may have been in practice for a very long time before these other qualifications came up. They can check a box that says, I have additional qualifications, and they have to submit what those are. They don't automatically get it as a requested. We review it. Blockchain, I know we talked about that 3 years ago. I was hoping it would come a little bit sooner, because we won't lose our jobs, but it will alleviate that paper chase and let us focus on things like privileging, FPP, OPPE, governance, all the other things we have on those urgent, emergent, and important that we can't seem to get to because we're spending our time chasing some paper. Online porters, not just the applications, but reviews, service portal requests. So we do have VCOM, which are all of our chiefs and other reviewers can go in electronically review and approve. But we're building a service request for our IT team or my tech team, because we get all kinds of requests internally and externally, and it was really hard for them to manage. So we're going to do it much like any other service does. You put in a ticket. And that way we have one place for all things. And then a strong budget. I put this in because I put it into my board. A strong budget to provide training, conferences, reimbursement for certifications and memberships. So incrementally, I've been successful in doing that for my team and in introducing that. And these are great opportunities to be able to share this with your team. I really commend Hardenbergh for putting this out and being able to reach those that may not have it in their budget or be able to afford additional training. So there's a couple of things, as we wrap this up. Remember that those medical staff, service professionals who are proactive and who create change, not have it imposed on them when it is necessary, and who thrive on challenges, will continue to achieve success for themselves and their organizations. As we all know, you either love this work or you hate it. There's no really gray area. You're not in it for a very long time if there is. And ultimately accomplish the goal of being the gatekeepers of patient safety. Nobody can get to a patient for physicians or APPs until they've gone through us for your organization. But remember, this is probably the most important part, is we also must be seen as the gateway to patient care. What are we doing to get those practitioners through the process to the patients, so there's satisfaction from leadership, from the applicant, and all of that. So remember, while we want to really be focused on that, gatekeepers, make sure that we've checked every box and dotted every I and crossed every T, we got to make sure that we're seen as the gateway, that people talk positively about the experience. So final thoughts on here. You have to be really proactive. You're going to have to commit time to doing this. But once you commit the setup and you start doing it, my team looks forward to it. And I sign, they all update their own slides. And then we come here and we have great discussion. Be okay with failure. This is the biggest thing. And maybe it should have been my first slide. If you continue to do this and work, overtime and not put in for overtime, or you're working more than, let's say 45 hours a week, and you're still getting this all done, you're going to drive yourself either out, exhaustion, burnout, any of that, or guess what the biggest thing is? They'll never see you need help. So you're going to have to assess the risk of where you want to fail. So when they come to you, you'll say, I need more resources. I've done that during the pandemic. I swing for the fence. I asked for 9 FTEs. And my boss was like, 9. I said, if I don't ask, I don't get. If I get 2 or 3, I'll be happy. I got 7 because I put the time in to communicate where the failures were and what we could do to improve, bottom line, money. If I can't get surgeons in quicker, then we're losing money. Stand your ground, protect your patients. Don't let people talk you into, well, they let us do it before. I heard that so much when I first got here. Research the impact of lack of planning on others. Scheduling. We ask for their schedules and they don't want to give them to us. So I can't help them, but we ask and we documented it. Rely on your physician leadership to set the example. Know your internal downstream data flow, so very important. And know who the owners are. A lot of times we get asked to be the executive sponsor on projects that are not ours only because they involve a physician component. No. Report out to leadership on requests, issues, and things quarterly. It's really important to do that. I do an annual for the board, but quarterly I present to the MEC, and I have a large report for that, what I present, volume, things like that, but also, tooting our horn, what we were able to accomplish in challenges that we have. And if we don't get these resources, what things we're going to have to put to the side. And that's been so effective in doing it. You can share, be very transparent, share these things with outside leadership, with other departments. They don't need to see everything, but I think being transparent is going to be the important part of people not assuming we're eating bonbons all day. And why can't we get this work done? I think there needs to be an understanding, but that legwork has to come from us. So, I hope that you get a pearl out of any of this, that the tools that you're going to get are going to be very useful. And I think, I've gone a little bit over. I want to make sure that we answer any questions that you might have. So I'm going to turn this back over to Lisa and address any questions that I can.
Thanks, Maggie. Tons and tons and tons of thank yous and wonderful presentation.
Oh.
It was fantastic.
Thank you.
We do have a few questions.
Sure.
Is there a standard formula you use for the number of MSPs per provider for workload?
Well, I do, because I had to figure it out for my particular organization. So I'm an acute care hospital. We do all the credentialing, privileging for OPP and FPP. My department does that. We don't get it from quality. So I can use those specific numbers for mine. So right now we have 3,100 practitioners. I have on my operations team, I have 10 medical staff coordinators, 4 credential specialists, and 3 seniors. So the 10, it's spread apart, but generally it kind of works out to about 300 annually per FTE, 3 to 325, because we'll have initials that flow through there as well. But our volume on initials may be 550 to 600 annually. Okay.
Do you have a checklist / timeline template for suspensions?
That's one that we're currently revising. because we follow our bylaws, but the bylaws are blah, 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 right? There's so many words in it, it's hard. So I will check because I have a department that handles that. I actually have a medical staff coordinator that's my legal liaison. And so she manages all that. If my LinkedIn is on there, I'll make a note to see if she's completed that. And if people contact me through the LinkedIn, I'll try to get that out to there. Okay.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Can you please provide the CMS regs that you spoke of requiring full board approval?
Well, the problem is they're silent to temporary privileges. So if you go to the CMS, you'll read in there, they are silent too. So silent means that it's not allowed, but I can look up at CMS and at least give you the regs number. Our legal team and also state of Texas interpret it. And I was actually at a conference maybe 4 years ago where the speaker said CMS does not recognize temporary privileges, but they've never pinged anybody on them. I don't want to take that risk. Our organization didn't want to take that risk. We're a county hospital. 95% of our patient mix is Medi-Medi. So we can't afford CMS, shutting us down essentially.
You mentioned about reducing the 3,100 staff size. What methods will you utilize?
So I get a report monthly of volume over the last 2 to 4 years in many areas. So volume of notes, volume of procedures, it's a humongous report. So I get that every month. And what I do is I tackle one specialty at a time. And what I do is I look at that volume and I look if they've done call, if their volume has gone down, do they need to move from active to affiliate less? Do they need to go to courtesy, which is membership only? I push that out to the chiefs with my recommendations, and then they either say yes or no, and they bring it back, and then we take it forward to committee. So I've been doing it for 1.5 years now, so it's not an overnight process. And COVID didn't help because we had to bring a lot of temporary privileges on, and that took away time from us being able to whittle down some of that staff. People didn't realize COVID affected my department too. They thought nobody would get COVID in our department for some reason. But
would you be willing to share the roles in each of your teams, operations, support, tech team, etc., and what the tasks, projects are that they work with?
Well, operations is exactly that. They do all of the credentialing, privileging from the release of accepting the request to release, to processing, to audit and committee, and then board closeout. So they do all of those processes. My support services team, which is made of medical staff coordinators as well, they do all the meetings, so bylaws, rules, regs, credentials meeting. I mean, not rules, regs meeting, credentials meeting, MEC. And so they're responsible for that. But we also have a matrix of all the bylaws, rules, regs, policies, and our standards for Joint Commission that monthly they go through and review to make sure that we're on track. So if you don't look until a problem happens, that's a problem. So we're trying to get proactive. And then my peer review, does peer review. I have 4 nurses that report to me, and I'm blessed as all get out to have 3 people on a tech team who do all of my, not only tech for our credentialing software, but reporting and also interface with other departments. FPP and OPPE, I have a team, we do all that. We run all the reports, we analyze it, and we work with the chiefs to get the release, and they process that. And that goes to credentials committee, but that's managed by my support services manager. Did I forget anybody? Hope not.
We might have a time for a couple more.
Okay.
Your ratio for staff, do you have CME or academic affairs credentialing included?
No, so we don't. CME is managed by UT Southwestern, who is our affiliate academic, and GME, we do have a GME program that is under professional medical affairs, but that is not under me at this time. So we don't facilitate that. We do, if fellows are going to be you know, working additional hours, we do credential them to the medical staff, but it's a very low volume.
Do you have the same people doing initials and reappointments?
Yes, I do. It's based on specialty because we feel it's important to develop relationships with those folks in those departments, from the hiring manager all the way up to the chief.
All right, one more. Would you be willing to share your staffing responsibilities format? We are looking to standardize our medical staff liaison work for our system.
Well, right now we're everything I'm doing, I've been here 4 years and it just seems like it never stops. We are also revising all of our job descriptions because of the structure that we've put into place. And I think we have an expectations document I could be willing to share, but I think it's globally for the entire team. We put it into place when we went remote 2 years ago. So everybody knew what the expectations of, you would think, of the work they needed to do. But because we were going to a new environment, we made sure that we spelled it out and they signed the document. So I'll see if I can find something to that.
Okay, it's 2:05. I know people, just a couple more questions are coming in, but we do want to be conscientious of time, even though we did start a few minutes late. I do want to remind everyone that you will receive a thank you email from Hardenbergh. Within the email will be your CE certificate, the slides from today's presentation, and we do ask that you take the short survey. So thank you, Maggie. Appreciate it. Wonderful, wonderful presentation. Loved it.
Thank you. Thank you.
So,
well,
thank you, everyone.
I hope at least one thing came out of this for everybody. That's all I look for in a presentation. So I appreciate everybody's time today. And thank you, Lisa and Mams, for sponsoring this with Hardenbergh. I think it's an awesome, awesome, awesome thing to do.
So you are welcome. Bye, everyone.
Right.
Take care.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.